Hi, Jasmine here. Okay. um, this is a hard video to make. It's a hard topic for me to talk about. Um, and I've been really bad about talking about it, and today I am deciding that's gonna change. I'm gonna talk about mental health in Parkinson's. For me, for so many years, um, physical decline for me far preceded any kind of emotional mental issue whatsoever. Um, and for me, physical decline is far easier to accept because I am somebody who put her whole life into studying and to using my brain. I was never athletic or, um, physically all that into things. I mean, I was a singer, and I lost that because of PD, and that is really difficult. Was really difficult. I very much processed that by now. It was years ago. But I never felt by being physically disabled that I was really, really losing my life. I mean, of course, before I had brain surgery, especially when it was getting to the point where I wasn't able to live unassisted or sometimes even get out of bed unassisted, that was hard physically, and that was probably the biggest challenge that I've ever had to overcome. Stage 4 stinks. It just does. But for the past couple of years, I have struggled mentally and emotionally, and I haven't talked about that. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry for not talking about that. Because I feel like so many people expect me to be strong and see me as this person who could handle everything. And I'm not. I am just a person, and I am fragile like any other person. And having gone through all the physical things that I have gone through, it doesn't make me any more able than anybody else to deal with some of these very real emotional side effects of Parkinson's and mental side effects of Parkinson's that I will talk about. One of the hardest things that I've ever had to do, and that I'm still not good at. I mean, guys, I'm so still not okay with this. And I'm really working on being okay with this, but being able to say, hi, my name is Jasmine and I have dementia. That scares the shit out of me. It just does. But the thing about it is that dementia is not what people think it is. People automatically assume like advanced stage Alzheimer's when somebody says dementia. All it really is some errors in executive functioning. Sometimes I lose my train of thought in the middle of it. I always find it eventually, but sometimes I'm in the middle of a sentence and I lose my train of thought, and it's so embarrassing. And I feel, every time that happens, I just feel awful. And then I go into this like, oh my gosh, like I'm losing my mind, like I'm stupid, like this is terrible. And that's not even it. Having Parkinson's associated dementia does not mean that I am unable to follow my dreams. It does not mean that I am unable to be a scientist and to practice anything else that anyone who didn't have this could do. I just have to adjust how I do it. And I have to not apologize for it and for losing my train of thought in the middle of a sentence or video. Whoops. Going back to my point, I also have been having some really crippling anxiety lately, and I have not talked about that. Pretty much everyone with Parkinson's at some point is going to have some anxiety and depression, and sometimes some apathy. And for me, the apathy was the hardest thing that I've ever struggled with, because I used to be somebody who was so good at doing, and I used to be somebody who was so go for it. In college, my first 2.5 years of college before the Parkinson's accelerated so drastically to a point where I physically couldn't. I had a 3.89 GPA, and I was taking 1,000 classes that nobody thought was a good idea. Everyone was like, calm down. And I wasn't. I was so, go get it, go get it. So for me, having done all that and then having this disease make me feel completely apathetic, and I just felt broken. I felt like I lost a part of my identity. I lost a part of my sense of self when I couldn't motivate myself to do simple tasks. And that broken feeling completely tore me down. And I pretended that wasn't happening to me. I pretended that it was all okay when it was not. And I pretended that I was okay with it. And I wasn't. And even now, as I'm trying to deal with this, I'm not dealing with it right. I mean, I still blame myself for projects I haven't finished. For the things I haven't done that I feel like I should have done by now. For being 23 and for not having had a stable job after college because I physically just can't do it. Because I can't get through the day without taking a nap, and that's okay. But it's not okay to me, but I'm working on it. And so what I'm making this video to say is that I'm struggling, and there's so much I want to do. There's so many projects I want to do. I have like 10 pages of like things I need to film for YouTube in Parkinson's education that I really want to do, and I will do. But I'm making this video because I am publicly here acknowledging that it's okay, and that if you're going through this and you're feeling apathetic because of Parkinson's, or if you're having any other mental health issue, it's not your fault. And that seeking help doesn't make you weak. And that if you follow me and you see me as some sort of pinnacle of strength, I am struggling too. So it is okay. This morning I saw the Department of Psychiatry at Kaiser. She was actually a social worker, and she's trying to refer me out to somebody. I guess Kaiser's contracts people in the community with private practices in the community for psychiatry to have somebody who can help me deal with the anxiety that's just been growing. After nearly 9 years of having Parkinson's, my anxiety was something, and depression was something that didn't really hit me very hard until after I had the brain surgery. It was probably towards the very end of my senior year. And I think the one really frustrating thing is that everybody just assumed that it was because I had a hard life and that I was just upset, because how could I not be upset? I had a feeding tube and a central line, and I just had brain surgery. And everyone just assumed that because I was having a rough time health-wise, that any depression was because of course I'd feel sad. But in reality, at that point, I had really come to cope with where I was at health-wise. And it was chemical. It is chemical. And it's just because Parkinson's up your brain chemistry. It just does. It's destroying neurons that make vital neurotransmitters. Of course you're going to have some sort of chemical issue that's going to alter your perception. And it isn't just because I am having a rough health time. And that's important, I think, to assert, because it doesn't matter if you have Parkinson's. If your Parkinson's is really well under control at this moment and you're feeling depressed, it doesn't matter and is no less valid than me being depressed in the hospital after a tube disaster and 2 brain surgeries. It's not any less valid. It's chemical, and getting help is not any less important. No matter how great your life is going, you can still get depressed, you can still get anxious, and it's not your fault. It's chemical, and I urge you to get help. And I am sitting here after 9 years of Parkinson's and having gone through so many treatments. The doc asked me this morning, she was just like, have you ever, like, through all this, did you ever, like, talk to somebody? And I didn't. And I'm sitting there just like, why didn't I? Why didn't I? Here I am, somebody with all of the knowledge and all the current research and stuff at her fingertips, and this immense privilege of having gone to school for science. And sometimes even I, who preaches self-advocacy, just does not have the mental stamina to be my own advocate. And that's why I share things, is because even with all this, it's still hard. It's still really, really hard. And if I'm having a hard time and I have this knowledge, then I need to share it because somebody's having a worse time without the knowledge. So anxiety and depression are two things that I'm really dealing with, and I am going to actively start talking about and start trying to find a treatment plan that works for me so that I can get back to doing the things that I love without random anxiety attacks just ruining my life. Because I want to do things and I want to be able to live my life and to live unapologetically. And so that is what I am working on right now. And I wanted to share that. The other thing that I'm really dealing with right now, on top of the stress and anxiety, depression, and, stressing out about executive functioning, which pretty much doing really well with, because I have learned how to cope very well with the lapses in my, sometimes it's taking short-term memory and putting it into my long-term memory, but certain things stick a lot of times, especially if I read something. I've been nearly photographic memory for reading, for seeing things. And so sometimes it's as simple as having written things down and then being able to transfer that. And if I forget a name or something, to not beat myself up over it, because I can still remember all the random formulas from physical chemistry that I took in 2014, but I can't remember, like, the names in a movie that I saw last week. Or I can, remember every detail of a book I read, but forget what happened, a plot point in, like, my favorite TV show. It's okay. And I got completely off topic, thanks to executive functioning. Parkinson's dementia. What are you gonna do about it? So, medical PTSD. This is one of the hardest things that I've been dealing with lately. Medical PTSD is defined as, you sure you all know what PTSD is, post-traumatic stress, particularly relating to traumatic medical events. And it's been really getting to me lately, to a point where, so I haven't gone to the dentist in a couple years. My teeth are, I have good teeth. I'm lucky, thanks genetics, the one thing genetics gave me that's helpful. But I haven't gone in a couple years because with all the health stuff, it just kind of fell to the wayside. And for some reason, all of my medical stress is kind of like, it is like completely like panic attack level inducing to like think about going. The idea of the sterile room, the smells, the face masks, the needles and drills, and just the everything about that is just, it makes me flash back to some really difficult times. There's a couple of incidences in particular that I'm referring to that really caused me some serious issues with medical PTSD. And one of them I've been meaning to talk about. I've been trying to talk about this issue, this particular incident, for pretty much since it happened. And I have not been able to just sit there and write it out. I have not been able to just sit there and talk about it earnestly. And I'm still not quite ready I will at some point, but there was this time about 2 months before I had my first deep brain stimulation surgery. And thank God I was at home. I'm so thankful that I was at home and not at my apartment at college. I have no idea what I would have done if I wasn't at home. But I woke up completely unable to move or talk, but I was completely conscious. And my parents could not wake, like my eyes were open, that they couldn't get me to respond. I just had this like look of fear in my eyes because I was terrified. I could hear everything, and they called 911, and I was transported. They couldn't pick me up because I was so locked. So they called 911, and at this point I was also having some pretty bad blood pressure and heart rate issues too. So it was just I'm so thankful for paramedics. And they, my room at the time was upstairs. I was sleeping in my childhood bedroom. This was, 2015, April 2015. And I was moved onto this gurney, and my hip was so locked that, like, if this was a table, it was sticking out like my hip was just, like, was bent, sticking out over the table. Gravity wasn't even affecting it. That's how locked in my body was. And there's little things I remember. Like, I remember the morning coffee breath of the paramedic telling me it was going to be okay. I remember the bay of the ER. I was actually moved from a different hospital to a Kaiser hospital. I have a vague recollection of that, but I was knocked out pretty quickly because they gave me some benzos to relax my body. That was all they could think of. Of course, I knew that they should have given me an apomorphine injection, or apomorphine or Apokin. It's not actually morphine. It's derived from the same thing, but it's not opioid. It's a Parkinson's. It's a dopa agonist that has the same strength, potency as Cinemet, and it could be used as a rescue injection. Regardless, that is what they should have done, and I could hear them doing the wrong thing. And I remember them pulling the blanket up over me, and the blanket was kind of scratchy, and my sensory processing was just going wild. Like, I was so tactily stimulated. The blanket was so scratchy that I just was like, and I couldn't actually scream, which I think was the hardest part. But I was just mentally just screaming like, somebody help me, because this blanket was the most painful thing. And I'm so lucky that my dad was there, and he knew that he understood I had sensory issues like that, and he saw the blanket and he moved it. I couldn't tell anyone to do it, but he moved it, and I remember just feeling the extreme relief when the scratchy blanket stopped touching my skin. I remember the cold IV going into my arm, and then I remember waking up around 8 p.m. and the doctor wanted to admit me, and I could move again a little bit, and I said, I want to go home. And that day this is the most that I've been able to talk about it in some sort of public way. Just sitting here talking to my computer and filming this. That's the most that I have really talked about it. Because every time I try to talk about it, or I try to write about it, I just can't, and something else has to be said first. So here I am 2.5 years later, and finally I feel like I can at least start to talk about that day. The other time that really got to me was about a month before I graduated college in April of 2016. Was my feeding tube was failing, and any little bit of tube food being pushed in was like getting kicked in the abdomen, and the tiny amount of tube food I was pushing in made my body generate a ton of bile, which is bile is used to break down fat, and it's secreted into your small intestine. But my small intestine wasn't moving fast enough, and it was backing up into my stomach, and I was just vomiting, like, sorry for like the TMI here, but I was just vomiting mass quantities of bile, like sinkfuls of bile. Like, I just could not stop throwing up, and I was thinking, like, where is all this even coming from? How is my body making all this? But it was just, my gut was unable to move it, and I was just throwing it up, and that was sort of the symbolic end. I was in the hospital for 10 days from that tube feed failure. And I lost 5 pounds over those 10 days in the hospital. they gave me TPN in the hospital, and that was sort of the symbolic end to my tube feeding journey. And that's when I started TPN. And so now here I am trying to start tube feeds again, and honestly, I have not gotten above rate of 30 because putting tube feeds up makes me flash back to that hospital stay and to that time. And so it's very difficult to and my family's home. It's very hard to be able to do this thing that I'm supposed to be doing that's supposed to be good for my health, because all I can do is think about that and associate with that. And so it's really difficult. And so I'm trying to cope with all this, and I'm going to cope with all this, and I want to share I'm coping with all this because I know I'm not the only person going through it. And so, well, I'm not perfect, people, and it's okay. And so I'm sharing this in hopes that talking about this, one, helps me and also helps you. So, bye. I'll be back.